Now, experts are testing the sludge from the dam burst at Jagersfontein in the Free State to see if it poses any additional risk to human life. At least 164 homes were damaged and one person killed in the dam burst. One person is still missing. About 77 learners have not been attending school at Jagersfontein after the mine dam burst flooded the town with sludge. The Free State Education spokesperson, Howard Ndaba, says they have realized that the poor attendance is as a result of fear and anxiety, loss of uniforms and insufficient supply of water. Some of the learners are in temporary shelters outside of Jagersfontein after they were displaced when their homes were damaged, while some were washed away by the sludge. All right, now let's discuss this. We're now joined via Zoom by Dr. Anthony Turton, Environmental Advisor. Dr. Turton, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Now, of course, what happened in Jagersfontein, as we speak to expert advisors, should not have happened. Talk to us about just your reactions and your thoughts about this disaster.
Yes, indeed. My deepest sympathy to those who lost their lives and livelihoods, because I think this is a serious tragedy for those people. It's also obviously an environmental matter, but it brings into focus, in my opinion, the whole transition in South Africa from an active mining to a post-mining era. And in this regard, one of the big hazards that we face is this whole thing of surface tailings dams, the management of surface tailings dams, the different types of dams, different minerals that are being mined. Each have got their own peculiar hazard associated with it. But we are entering a situation now where more and more people are directly exposed to tailings in some form or other. Not all tailings are equal, but all tailings are hazardous in some way or other.
Now, just from your expert analysis, I mean, we've been hearing that there could be some toxicity, levels and some concern over the sludge that has obviously spilled to large parts of, the area, damaging houses, as we said, over 170, and also exposing some of the sludge to, to children. How worried should emergency services be, as well as government officials that are still on the ground?
Yes, I think that's a very important question, and we need to understand that within any mining operation, there's a milling process where the valuable product that is being mined is removed from the ore body. That results in a fine powdery type of substance, which is becomes known as tailings. That tailings has to be disposed of. But depending on the geology, the host geology of the mineral being mined, that determines the long-term toxicity of the tailings, because it also determines the kind of process used to extract the mineral. So if there is any silver lining to this very dark cloud, I would say it lies in the fact that kimberlite, which is the mineral, the host rock for diamonds, is generally not toxic. And as a result of that, also because of the physical properties of your diamonds that are being recovered, they are also not generally in need of all kinds of complex chemicals. So, for example, kimberlite tailings, which we have in this case, is vastly different to gold mine tailings, which litters the Witwatersrand landscape, the Gauteng landscape, but all of that has got cyanide and a whole range of other heavy metals in it. So tailings are different, and we need to understand that. I think there are obviously risks involved, but I personally think that the toxicity risk in this case is probably one of the lower risks. Now, it doesn't mean there's no risk, it just means that is a lower risk to the rest.
Now, what is worrying, is the fact that this particular mine was found to be non-compliant in certain sectors, as far as the Department, of Water and Sanitation is concerned, dating back to around 2020. I mean, the concern then is, what systems are in place for government to ensure that mining companies such as this one do comply so that we prevent such disasters?
This is an extremely important issue because in my professional experience, there's been a very checkered compliance record. In some cases, mines have been allowed to get away with things that they weren't allowed to get away with simply because they were politically connected. And in other cases, irrespective of what they did, they were hammered simply because they weren't politically connected or for other reasons. So I think this brings into sharp focus the need for a credible regulatory authority with a credible process that is applied without fear or favor. All tailings dams are hazardous, irrespective of what they contain. And particularly the hazard increases over time, particularly when we transition to a post-mining future, when mining is no longer active. A whole different set of hazards then become available. And this is where it's so vitally important that we have a credible regulatory authority that applies the rules without fear or favor, and that is harsh on those that break the rules, but is willing to cooperate with those mining operations that want to apply the rules. Rules are good for business, they're good for health and safety, they're good for the public. We need a clear set of rules that are applied without fear or favor.
And of course, what is of concern, if you look at just the legacy in terms of mining in this country dating back more than 100 years, you would imagine that, disused mines are probably scattered all over the country. What systems are in place? I would imagine they are in place so that we can then, be assured that this won't happen again, particularly in a small mining town like we've seen with Jagersfontein, where again, it is the poorest of the poor that are being affected.
Oh, yes, this is a very, very hot topic, highly contested topic. This is the reality is that it was the mining industry that brought into South Africa the notion of law and order. Before the mining industry was created, South Africa was a free-for-all. We didn't have proper law and order. We didn't have a proper legislative process. In fact, South Africa as a country was born in the Union of South Africa in 1910, and the first legislation that was passed was, in fact, mining legislation. So we can argue that it was the mining process that has brought law and order to South Africa. And now what we start seeing is in the closure phase, there are many, many mines. And I can give you an example, just around the Gauteng area, there are over 10,000 openings, 10,000 points of entry into an underground void. And yes, there are rules and laws about that, but they're not being applied. So you now have the emergence of a completely parallel economy where you've got illegal operations happening side by side alongside legal operations. And these two things are run by completely different laws. And I give you an example. I'm aware of facts where legal operations deep underground, as the people get out of the cage at the bottom of the shaft to go and work on their shift, they get robbed at gunpoint by illegal zama-zamas that are operating with impunity down there. Whereas a legal miner cannot take a firearm underground, but the illegals do. Whether they're allowed to or not, they simply do. So we've got this, I think, the emergence of this parallel economy. And this parallel economy, one's about rules and the law and about taxes being paid and orderly management. And the other one now is this parallel a universe where there are no rules. It's completely chaotic. It's driven by criminal syndicates. There's gang turf warfare, if you like. There's no taxes paid, but there's and the money is siphoned off into, let's call it, warlords' war chests. So this is what we are starting to see now in South Africa, and I believe we're going to see this more and more going forward. And this particular case is just one of those that's going to start highlighting that. Remember, this comes on the back of some recent violent protests on the West Rand of Gauteng over the illegal zama mining issue. So this is going to become a very, very important topic leading up to the next general election, and how government deals with it is going to impact very, very strongly on how investor confidence is restored in South Africa, what future capital will flow into South Africa, because if government's unable to get their hand on this and demonstrate that they're in control of it, then I'm afraid capital is simply not going to come back to South Africa.
And that topic of illegal miners requires another interview, I'm afraid, Dr. Turton. Thank you so much for your time. That's all the time we have for this afternoon. Dr. Anthony Turton, their environmental advisor.